let's talk about cell division under meiosis 1, and this is part 2 of this video. In my previous video, I introduced to you what meiosis is, the definition of meiosis, and we looked at the first phase of meiosis. But in this video, we are going to discuss the other phases which remained. In my previous video, I said meiosis 1 is divided into 4 phases, which is prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and telophase 1. And we went further to discuss what prophase 1 is and the 5 stages of prophase 1. So now in this video, I'm going to explain what happens under metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and telophase 1. So let's start by looking at metaphase 1. Then from there, we're going to look at anaphase 1, lastly telophase 1. Okay, so under metaphase 1, what happens is that the spindle fibers become prominent and get connected to the centromeres of the homologous chromosome. So the spindle fibers become prominent, they extend and they connect themselves to the homologous chromosomes. We can see this in this chromosome here. We have these spindle fibers. They have extended from the centrosomes and they are attached to the chromosome at a region called the centromere. And the main region where it is attached, if you want to become specific, it is where that yellow part which is called the kinetochore. The kinetochore is the region where these microtubules, which are called the spindle fibers, attached to the chromosome. So that's what happens under metaphase 1. Then after they have attached, what happens is that the chromosomes moves and align on the equatorial plane. So the bivalent chromosomes moves and align on the equatorial plane. This is illustrated here. Here we can see the two chromosomes have aligned on the equatorial plane, and the spindle fibers here have attached to the chromosomes there. So that's what happens under metaphase 1. So let's move on to anaphase 1. So after the microtubules have attached themselves and the chromosomes have aligned themselves, what happens is that these chromosomes now, they separate. They are pulled by the spindle fibers and they separate from each other and move to the opposite poles of the cell. So they move to the opposite poles of the cell. So that is, each pole will only have half the number of chromosomes, which is haploid. So each pole will receive half the number of chromosomes, and that is haploid. As we discussed in the previous video, half of the number of chromosome is haploid. So that's what happens under anaphase. Like you can see here, the two chromosomes which were aligned on the equatorial plane are now pulled to the opposite poles of the cell. So that's what happens under anaphase 1. Then from there, after anaphase 1 has taken place, we move on to telophase 1. So this is the last stage of meiosis 1. Telophase 1 is the last stage of meiosis 1, and what happens under telophase 1 is that is the reorganization of the chromosomes at poles occur to form two haploid nuclei. So the nucleus, like one is nucleus and two is nuclei, so are formed. Two of them are formed, and another thing is that the nuclear membrane is formed. The nuclear membrane is formed. So the nuclear membrane is simply the membrane which covers the nucleus is formed, and then the spindle fibers disappear. The spindle fibers disappear. Now the cell membrane starts to constrict and two daughter cells genetically unidentical, they are not identical, are formed. Two daughter cells unidentical are formed. So that's what happens under telophase 1. We can see we have two nuclei now. There are two. They have been moved to the other opposite poles, and the membrane starts to constrict. The constriction of cell membrane starts, and that leads to formation of two daughter cells which are genetically unidentical because of crossover which happens in prophase 1. So thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave out your comment in the comment section below.